I think that COVID has the potential to be a very beneficial thing for society. I think in moments of stress, we have the ability to change in a positive manner. Who we are as people is who we are under stress.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to hack your nervous system and your immune system, then do we have the Wedge show for you. Today I'll be talking with Scott Carney, New York Times best-selling author, award-winning investigative journalist and anthropologist, and the author of a brilliant new must-read, The Wedge. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about evolution, consciousness, stress, and resilience, especially in this coronavirus time. That, plus we'll talk about throwing kettlebells with love, shivering dogs in coats, gotcha, monkey minds in the modern world, how in the world you speak with a macrophage, and what in the world Lambert, 3 leaps, and a rooftop has to do with anything. So welcome back to the show, Scott. Are you ready to shine?
I am ready, my friend. Thanks for having me back on.
Woohoo! Well, thank you so much for being here. I feel like we are similar scientists of the world, geeking out and trying to understand things that on one level people have just taken for granted. On another level, they have no idea what's going on. So before we dive into all of those things and COVID-19 today, what was your life-changing experience on Kilimanjaro with Wim Hof, aka the Iceman?
Right. So Wim Hof, he's the subject of my third book called What Doesn't Kill Us. Yeah. And I was the first journalist really ever to write about him in any sort of serious way. And this was for Playboy. I actually end up shirtless in Playboy. I don't know if you've interviewed anyone who's been shirtless in Playboy, but that's me, this guy. And I had just written a huge series of articles about the dangers of meditation, like the dark side of the path to enlightenment, where people end up in mental institutions, where people die, especially where they're chasing after superpowers. And I heard about Wim Hof and I was like, this guy is a charlatan. And my whole career was sort of built on this sort of investigation. I went out to meet him in Poland in 2011. And, long story short, I got it wrong because Wim's stuff worked. Wim is this guy who meditates on glaciers and he melts the snow around him. He claims to be able to control his immune system. And I was like, this is going to be an easy disproving. This can't happen. But in a week, I was doing the same stuff he was. I climbed up a mountain in my underwear. I was, meditating and the snow was melting around me. And the technique was very fast to learn. And it sort of changed my life because I had to go investigate this. And I spent many, many years. It's funny. I was actually writing a book on how meditation can kill you. At the same time, I was writing the book about how meditation can make you super awesome. And then I ended up climbing up Mount Kilamanjaro with him in a really fast period of time. We were going to go up, and it usually takes 5 days to get to the top. And our plan is to get there in 30 hours. We asked the U.S. Army and the Dutch Mountaineering Association if we'd make it. The Army said, no, most of you are going to get altitude sickness and get evac'd off the mountain. And the Dutch mountaineers all said we were going to die. But I made it up to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in negative 30-degree weather in 28 hours. And that journey really just changed me because I had to understand why the Wim Hof method worked. Like what was the underlying principle here? And can it be generalized to things that aren't just sitting in your underwear on icebergs, but actually to everything in life? And that's where we get the wedge.
One of the things that's interesting to me, and I do these similar kind of unusual things. I was running around barefoot a good decade and a half ago in Boulder in a snowstorm, and people are yelling, Iceman. And I'm like, who is that? I had no idea. But something that really stuck with me about your journey to the top of Kilimanjaro. And it was at a time when Wim kind of got wobbly, I believe, may have gone down on one knee, and you're seeing the humanness of him.
Right.
And something welled up inside of you and you said, I wasn't really on the mountain. In a way, I was the mountain.
Yes. Yes. I mean, so there's two things going on here. The first is that, Wim Hof is this really charismatic sort of guru figure that a lot of people idolize, right? A lot of people are putting him on a pedestal, which honestly, he shouldn't be, because Wim is a great man. He opened up the world to me in a lot of different ways, but he is not a perfect man, right? He is fallible just like everyone else. And what I consider him a madman and a prophet at the same time. And I think that it actually does him a disservice to put him on this pedestal, to call him superhuman, because what is the truth is that he just unlocked something that we all have in us. And Wim is a great example of what can be done, but no one wants to be Wim Hof. Not anyone who knows Wim Hof wants to be Wim Hof. Wim Hof should be himself and you should be you. But the fact is I made it up this mountain with him. And the reason I did it wasn't because I was following behind Wim Hof. It was because I was connecting to the environment around me. And I was letting the sensations of that -30-degree weather flow through me, and I was connecting to it, and that is what gave me that strength to be there. And I'm so grateful to Wim for having shown me the ability to do this. But also, there's so many other ways to do this. There's so many other ways to get into it. And so a lot of this journey is trying to understand that moment of this, you could call it samadhi, right? This moment we're at the top of the mountain and we're connected to everything. And we realize that I am not me, and Wim isn't Wim, and you aren't you. We're all just part of the same emanation, including the mountain itself, right? Including that mountain is part of me. And I am inseparable from it. And that's how I got there. And it's funny to even say I, because that's all about ego. It's like, no, it just happened.
Well, you talked about samadhi. You talked about us all being one and certainly being the mountain. Do you think at this time what is going on here, in a sense, is us being out of balance with the natural world?
In a way, it's about being in balance with the natural world, isn't it? I mean, in a way, that stress that's coming into society right now. I mean, as far as plagues go, I feel terrible for all the people who are dying, who are sick, and my heart goes out to them. But, the 1918 flu, the smallpox, all of the other plagues that have hit humanity have been much more serious. And I think this is a necessary reality check for society at large. And I think it's actually bringing people together. Yes. It's making people 4 months ago, I was looking at Twitter. I was getting angry at what the president said, and you can still do that. By all means, you can go on Twitter and get angry at what any politician says. But I actually feel much more grounded in myself now, because we all realize that there are things that are out of our control. And you either go crazy on that, and I think a lot of people went crazy on that at the beginning, or you relax into it and you say, look, whatever happens is going to happen, and I just still need to be me. I need to be here. You need to follow the health guidelines that exist in the world. You don't go spreading COVID around. But beyond that, you can't let it rip apart your insides, because if you do, you have no control over that thing that's outside of you, that it will hurt you to try to outthink the things that are unchangeable in the world.
Thank you. Well, it actually brings us, I can't believe we're going to go back to the mountain again, but you talk about the wedge being kind
Michael,
of...
it all goes back to the mountain.
It does all go back to the mountain. It does all go back to the mountain. And it's why I'm living on a mountain. It's why you live by the mountains. There's reasons for this. But you talk about the wedge as kind of being a nexus, body, mind, and the outer world, or you call the 3 pillars of health: diet, exercise, and the connection to the environment. This outer world, this connection to the environment, really, it's about, in a sense, flipping a mindset switch. I am experiencing cold, and I love running in the cold, as naked as I'm legally allowed to get. I will observe the cold. I will watch the cold. I will feel the cold, but I'm not the cold.
Right. That's a really good way to think about it, actually, is that, we have this, the cold is an external world. The external world exists, right? We know the external, there's this whole mind-only school of Buddhism, and that is probably inaccurate, that there is an outside world and there's an inside world. But the fact is that we're connected to that world through our senses, through the sensations on our skin. And to some degree, we have control over what those sensations mean. And if the cold is coming into you and you think it's going to be the worst thing in the world, it'll be the worst thing in the world. You will make that happen. And if you think that sensation on your skin is the sensation of joy, it will be the sensation of joy. And you can actually recode that. Now, you don't want to and here's the tension. You don't want to take that all the way into madness. Oh, that frostbite on my skin when I'm turning black is wonderful. No, it's not. Damage is bad. But
Yes.
before you get to damage, there's this what do you call it? There's this play in the environment, right? There's you think about the like a red part of a spectrum, and then there's the green, the yellow, and then the greens, right? We mostly stay in the greens. We mostly stay in the safe area, and our body starts turning on the alarm bells super early. It's like you just put your hand in ice water for a second, and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And honestly, no one has ever died from 1 second in the ice water. What happens is your body is very conservative. So what we're doing is we're saying, no, let's actually push us towards those limits. And then as you push your limits, you expand as a person, because who we are as people is who we are under stress, not who we are on our couch eating potato chips, right? We are people when we expand our limits into things that are greater than ourselves.
Thank you. So let's go from there. Let's talk about expansion. Let's talk about the immune system. We're going to weave our way through this today. I recently had on Dr. Bernie Siegel, and I'm having a polite disagreement with my wife on what we're going to title this show that comes out tonight, whether it's going to be Deceive Yourself into Perfect Health or something to do with the placebo effect, which is what you dive into. And Dr.
Right.
Bernie Siegel used to be considered a nutter as well for his out there theories, which have all been since proved accurate. And he said one of the ways you can tell if somebody is going to survive or thrive through chemo is how far they had to drive to get to the hospital for it.
No.
The farther they have to drive, the more positive will be their result.
Oh, well, so if I get cancer, I should just drive to New York? I'm going to like Sloan Kettering or something like that.
If it's really inconvenient for you, yes, Scott. But let's talk about placebo, nocebo. In fact, bring us to Mr. A, because this is fascinating.
So Mr. A, so this is the chapter on placebos where I begin the chapter with a very sort of recent-ish, probably in the last 10 years, case study of this guy named Mr. A, who was, they didn't name his name, but this is just taken out of the clinical literature. He had gotten in a fight with his girlfriend. And after that, he was like, for some reason, it wasn't listed in the clinical literature, but probably because he got in a fight with his girlfriend, he took all of the pills in one of his pill bottles. And he was in a clinical trial for an antidepressant, right? So he just took all his pills. Maybe he thought it would like alleviate his depression. Maybe he thought it would kill himself. And then he had some second thoughts and he ran to the hospital, blood pressure dropping to almost nothing. He was woozy. He's in a really bad state. And he just goes up to the nurse on duty, puts his pill bottle on the counter and says, I took all my pills, and then like passes out. Okay, right in front of her. And then the hospital goes, it's an emergency, it's a triage situation. And so the nurses look at the bottle, and all it says is the name of the clinical trial he's in, like a contact number and like a serial number. So they have no idea what chemical he took to make himself almost die. So they have to go figure that out. They have to go find the antidote. They call up the clinical trial, and they scramble to figure out what this guy did. And then they report back that he was in a clinical trial. And he was in the control group, which means he was just taking sugar capsules. And so his experience was what we call the nocebo effect, which is it's the evil twin of the placebo effect, which is a negative reaction by your body based on belief alone. That's how they would phrase it. And so he had almost died of placebos. And so this article is like super, super powerful. And I think it's in General Hospital Psychiatry. That's where it comes from. But you can look at it's in my book too. And what this shows is that the power of the mind to alter not just, some sort of like nebulous feeling about the world, but actually the mechanisms that make you thrive or die. And so if you can have this negative effect from a sugar pill and belief, then what's the converse? It's the placebo effect. And it leads us to think, it's very sort of strong proof that we have a lot more control over how our body responds to both medication. Like, what is a placebo anyway? Like if you're taking some for chronic illness. Now, It's different for like a bacterial infection where, you take penicillin and it kills the bacteria and you get better. And that's like pretty much like 98% effective. And the placebo is not, sugar pills don't help for bacteria. But for chronic illnesses, for things like arthritis and lupus and Crohn's disease, all these sort of nebulous things, our medications are not these silver bullets that are out there. They're things that manage symptoms. And if you start looking at the clinical literature, a large chunk of the effectiveness of these chronic drugs is the placebo effect. I mean, you'll get something like, and medications are coming to my mind. Oh, like Rogaine, right? The hair club for men, regrowing hair on your head. I haven't looked at these results in a little bit, but I believe it's somewhere like 27% of men regrow hair when they do the topical minoxidil on their head. But like 19 or 20% of men also regrow hair when they just put the placebo on their head. So instead of just saying that minoxidil works at 27%, we should also be thinking, what about that 20%? And what if we put similar amounts of research dollars into making better placebos? Maybe that could be a beneficial thing that scientists can pursue a little bit more, because and the problem, when you talk to people in the clinical spectrum, right? We have these gold standards of research, clinical controlled trials, double-blind tests, and they're great. Like science works. Love science. But you're never going to find someone to invest the $100 million into the research onto something which is like breath work or an ice bath, because you can't sell it for the whole lifetime of a chronic illness. Somebody who's on Crohn's disease, on some sort of immune suppressant drug, they might be getting $50,000 or $100,000 over that patient's lifetime for that drug. They don't get anything if they throw them into an ice bath. So where's the money going to be going for placebo research?
Thank you. We're going to dive more into this. I'm curious if I understood this right, that you used to have an autoimmune challenge for your whole life as well and don't anymore.
I know. That was the side benefit of the Wim Hof method. So I went out to debunk him. I ended up hanging out in snow in my skivvies, and that was pretty cool. And I had since I was a kid, I had these mouth ulcers called cankers. And cankers, there's actually some debate about what they are. But one of the theories is that they're an early herpes infection that you get, that then you clear. And then later in life, your body is responding to that. And you get these like large white mouth ulcers. And for me, it was particularly bad. They were about the size of a dime. I'd get them once a month and they'd last for like a week. And they sucked. I mean, it's not Crohn's, it's not lupus, it's much more minor than those. But for me, it was a huge problem. And after I did this story on Wim Hof, I kept on doing his breathing method all the time. I was living in Los Angeles, so the cold showers were sort of lame in comparison to what I could do in Poland. But I was doing the breathing, and the cankers just like never really came back. They just sort of like vanished. And in some ways, you would still feel them starting. Like if you've had cankers for a long time, every sensation that's affiliated with them. And sometimes I'd feel them start, and then I'd double down on the breath work, and then they wouldn't go anywhere. And so this for me was one of these eye-opening things that I had some control through Wim Hof's method of communicating with my body and stopping these mouth ulcers from coming. And the theory on why this works is, think about your immune system as a separate entity that has its own level of intelligence in your body. And, we talk about like immune systems learning viruses, right? They learn how to kill viruses. They remember how to kill viruses. You're not consciously thinking, oh, I have, smallpox in me and I have learned how to kill it, right? This is its own internal autonomic process that's going on in there.
Its own intelligence.
Its own intelligence, absolutely. And, the immune system is lots of different cells. It's actually a collection of 2 or 3 basic types of immune systems. There's a primary and the secondary, and then there's like T cells, B cells, all sorts of things that get involved in working in your body. But I like to think about the immune system in general as a pack of wolves, right? And it's running around your body, and this pack of wolves is going to eat the bad stuff that's out there. And in the environment that we live in now, where we don't actually have external challenges that actually threaten us on a regular basis, our ancestors, on the plains of Africa might see a lion charging them, and their response to the lion was grab a spear and go stab the lion, right? That's all that's called the sympathetic nervous system. You got adrenaline, cortisol, physical output for physical problem. Modern world, we're not like that, right? Modern world, it's like COVID's gonna kill me maybe someday. I don't know when, but it might, right? And then you stress out about that, but there's no COVID to kill with your spear. So what happens is you still have that Paleolithic body. So you drop the adrenaline, you drop the cortisol, it goes into your body, and there's no physical output. And that turns inside. And those wolves that are running around your body are dosed with adrenaline because they're living inside of you. You are a superorganism for your immune system. So these guys then, here's the theory, they just start eating you, right? Your wolves, when you've bored wolves, they start chewing on things. And for me, it was canker sores. That's how it manifested. But doing the Wim Hof method and the other things that I talk about in this book, where you have a physical output for a physical challenge, you give those wolves chew toys, right? You give them something else to do. And I've seen so many cases of autoimmunity reversing. And you can't say cure, right? Because it's still a maintenance thing. It'll never possibly come back. But I've seen so many people who've benefited from these sorts of interventions because they are giving these wolves chew toys. And it can be ice water, it can be these breathing protocols, it can be even just taking up a physical activity like running and getting your emotions involved with that can change autoimmunity because you have these physical outputs.
Thank you. I want to talk more about boredom with the wolves and how we can take care of that. Is there a Wim Hof 101 or a Scott Carney breathing 101 that people could safely try?
So you do this lying down first thing in the morning, and I wake up and I turn to my wife and we say, do you want to do the breathing? And we both say, not really. And then we say, but we're going to do it anyway. And that's the morning ritual dialogue that always happens. And so while you're still lying down, and this is important because you could, in theory, pass out doing this stuff, you want to create an excited breathing pattern. And that's sort of like a panic attack, right? And this is the stress you're putting yourself against, right? You're breathing like this, deep into your diaphragm, not in your shoulders, right? And you're trying to get to that dizzy place, right? That sort of difficult place. And for me, that's 30 or 40 breaths of this. And for some people who have anxiety, this can be very difficult to do, right?
This looks like a sympathetic nervous system response you're triggering. An animal will only breathe like this if they're in real danger or they've just given up. The lion has caught them, and this is where they're going to be breathing.
Exactly. And so you're you're sort of mimicking that state because you can do it consciously. And then you're trying to control your response to anxiety in that situation. And then you exhale basically all the way out, but not painfully out, right? And then you hold on the exhale for as long as you can until you get that gasping reflex, right? You could hold it till you pass out, but that's not beneficial. So hold it until you get to that point, and it should be very relaxing at first because you've gone from really high energy to low energy, and then your anxiety starts ramping up at the end of the breath hold. And then after you get to the point where you breathe, and here's where my variation changes a little bit. While I'm lying down, I'll take a half breath in, and then I'll squeeze my butt and my back and my shoulders, and I'll sort of push that energy up into my skull. And this can make you more dizzy. It can make you see visuals. It can make you have sort of a little minor psychedelic effect for some people.
It's similar to the Wim's DMT breathing?
Yeah. It's basically adding in a little bit of Wim's DMT breathing into this method. Then I repeat the method again, and I do a full 30 breaths, and then I hold again, and then I do the same sort of DMT thing, and then I do it one more time. And so that is the breathing method. And the first hold is about a minute, the second hold is about 2 minutes, and the third hold is about 3 minutes. You shouldn't have a watch in front of you. You're not racing the watch. I just have timed myself several times to know that's around where I am. And so then at that, And then you do one more round after this, after doing your 3 breath holds. And then I immediately do some push-ups while holding my breath. And usually I get to about 50 push-ups without breathing. And that's my morning routine. And if I don't do it in the mornings, my day's worse. It's measurably worse. It's just not as bright, I don't feel as content. And I know that for me, it's a hugely beneficial practice. Although I think I also want to point out that this book, The Wedge, where Wim Hof Method is one of the many wedges that I speak about. This book is not supposed to be the 10 awesome things you can do to make yourself super awesome, right? It's not like a cookbook where you throw kettlebells, you do some flotation tanks, you do some ayahuasca, and boom, you're perfect, right? No. Instead, what this is here's the journey that I've gone through. Here's the stuff that has worked for me. But what might work for you could be entirely different, right? For me, for instance, I hate the gym. Just despise the gym. I hate the idea of working at machines. And for me, it's like wiring anxiety into my body because I'm trying to work for my 6-pack. And so I don't like the gym. However, my wife loves the gym and gets so much out of it. And I think that's really important to note that what might work for me will not work for everyone by definition. But what we can do is see that interaction, that moment between stress and then where I have control over how I respond to that stress. That is the wedge. This is where you're inserting space between the environment and your mind, where you have an element of choice. And this is the thing that we're trying to teach, right? This is the thing that I'm trying to dig down to. And I'm not saying I created this. I mean, to some degree, the Tibetans have been talking about this. The yogis have been talking about this. The human potential movement has been talking about this. And lots of other places talk about this. But there are wedges everywhere. And I want people to realize that.
Having been a pro cyclist and raced in Europe for a few years, there was a wedge in cycling that now, if you ever watch a bicycle race, you will see differently. Which is to say, bicycle races are won and lost by a 1/10 of a second. And it's not the 1/10 of a second at the finish line that you think it is. It is somebody goes to attack, to drop the hammer, to do who knows what, and you have a decision in that moment. And that's where human resilience takes place. How you're going to be, what your mindset is going to be, by wedging in there, as you're describing, will change the entire outcome.
Yep. Yeah. Do you let that person pass? Do you not? I absolutely see that. I also am not too big of a fan of competition, weirdly enough. I see the appeal of it. But in physical things, I'm like, we should only be competing against ourselves at the end of the day.
I've taken to a whole nother level, which is I would like to see, I think I'll call it a Olympics. I don't know, there's got to be a better word, where we come together as a group, come together as one people and see what we can do for human growth and evolution and gain together as a team of humanity instead of one against the other. That's the Olympics that I would like to see now.
Yeah. The celebration of people who excel, who do amazing things, that's amazing. I love that. But it's not the fact that they defeated somebody, right? And I think in Greece, there's this idea of arete, right? Where, now it's blank, Aeneid, Ajax, Achilles, right? Achilles is like the epitome of arete, where he is this champion and he's the best at everything. And even though, honestly, Achilles was sort of an in a lot of ways. The thing that was great about him was his greatness, and that is what he is celebrated for. He's not celebrated for the fact that he was sort of a to everyone he talked to, right?
So going from there, you've got me thinking about the lockdown, and we're going to play very quickly with a whole bunch of ideas here. But you were talking about the immune cells needing dopamine, and they need a challenge in order to keep strong. And it got me thinking about our minds and lockdown, particularly our seniors, but it could be for all of us, that we're getting the dopamine hit of the news, but that's not really what's going to make us, my guess is, more resilient. It could. Mm-hmm. You can link meditation to your news, as I'm doing in some boot camp groups right now. Mm-hmm. But we need that challenge for the mind too, don't we, in order to stay sharp?
Yeah, we need things to push up against that then we have control over. And that's really what this stuff is all about, right? It's the things that you're fighting. You should fight things that you can make a difference in. Like, for instance, I can get angry at a politician in office. but I can't do anything about it, right? Like I can go write on Twitter, you're wrong for liking this politician, but I can't do anything about changing that person's mind. So that's all wasted action. That's all wasted energy. And all it does is make me feel bad. And maybe I succeeded when I made the other people feel bad. Like that's not a why am I doing this to the universe, right? And we need these things that we can push against and have results with, because that gives us that gives us literal control over our environment, right? And it gives us an emotional release, and it makes us feel better. So, what do you do during COVID? You should go garden, right? You should go running. You should go bicycling. You should go have conversations with your friends that are fulfilling and connecting and not tearing people down, even if they're wildly wrong about something, right? Even if they are completely wrong, you should be trying to find the common ground, and that will make you feel better, and that will make you healthier too. And the thing about dopamine, because that thought wasn't quite finished. Dopamine is the reward center for our brain, right? When you get dopamine, and when you get that dopamine rush, it's because something good is happening. You're getting this reward. The interesting thing that I talk about in the Wedge is that dopamine is also a very important neurotransmitter for the immune system. And we've not actually figured out exactly what it's doing. We just know it's there. We know that it is learning. And I think that sensations matter, right? I think that sensations, how we feel the world is very important to who we are, to how our bodies function. And those feelings mean everything. Like, it's sort of like the purpose of life in a way, is to have sensations. And dopamine is one sensation that comes in. And seeing dopamine in the immune system makes me think that the immune system is having sensations too, right? When I'm on Kilimanjaro, I'm up there, and I'm feeling all the wind on my body, and I'm releasing some sort of hormones into my bloodstream. That's reasonable. I don't know what I was releasing. I was releasing stuff in there. And my gut bacteria and my macrophages, which are an immune cell, and all these other things in my body are bathed in whatever I was dumping into my body. And in that sense, they are also on Kilimanjaro, and they are feeling it through the lens of me. So I see that human experience is sort of like a layered, like Russian dolls nested inside of each other. And the things inside of us, we know that if your gut bacteria disappear, you are a different person. Your emotions are different. Your personality is different. You are depressed. There's all these things that change about you. And I think it's really important to know that gut bacteria is you, but it's also external to you. So you have to be in conversation with your body, and you can do that through sensation. The sensations actually, like if you feel that cold is horrible, you're going to release more adrenaline, right? Because the cold is horrible, so you have to fight that horrible thing. But if you think that cold is great, you're going to release different sets of hormones, and then your macrophages and your bacteria and all these other things are going to have a different experience because you created that for them.
I've actually envisioned I get out of my car and I throw off all my clothes and I'm like, surf's up. It's time to go play. And I imagine the cold as a warm blanket, which sounds really weird. Cold is a warm blanket just holding me, embracing me. And all of a sudden, it's a very different experience. You talk about in the immune system, because really what we're talking about, and I want to dive into some of these specifics, but you're talking about in many ways coming alive through sensation. And you talk about if we do things that make us feel good, quite literally, we're boosting our immune system. If we may do things that make us, in a sense, feel bad, and I can see your gears turning. Go, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. I don't know if good or bad is really the right word for it. And that's where I was crunching on, because the goal of life is not hedonism, right? The goal of life is not to live just happiness. The goal of life is to live in ways that expand who you are. And sometimes that doesn't feel good, but you can have like an ice bath. I hate ice baths. Yeah. Hate them. You look at an ice bath, someone says, Scott, you go to an ice bath, and I like shiver right now. And I look at an ice bath and I'm like, I don't want to get in that. Hell no, I don't want to get in that. And then I do, because that's what I do. And then you get in the ice bath, and then you're like, this is hard. This is hard. but I can do it. And then there's that transitioning that negative stimulus into a positive stimulus. And that's what's important. It's the challenge and then framing that challenge in a positive way. It's not just like do heroin all the time because it makes you feel good. Like that's not the path.
No.
And getting and meditating to that blissful state, because you can do this. You can get to bliss with meditation. And then just staying in the bliss is actually also not beneficial because it's just the bliss. And we don't want that.
I did that for several years of holding space 6 months in a row on Maui for 2 years straight of holding
Sounds
space
awesome.
in a meditation center 3 or 4 hours a day. It felt great. But you know what, Scott? The rest of my world was crumbling around me at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to, like life. Here's the way I open the book, right, is I got a really bad thing to tell you. It's going to scare you. And it's essentially, we're all going to die. Like the everything in life ultimately is going to end. If life is a song, it's a melody, whatever, it's ending in a minor key. We know this. Like that death is probably, I've seen several people die. I've been present for people's deaths. I've seen traumatic deaths. I've seen less traumatic deaths. And the thing is that moment is not what you're living for. Right? The point of life is not to be on your deathbed and look back and say, hey, I got some great stories, or hey, I made a lot of money, or whatever it is, right? That the death, I think we should just accept as bad. And I think the old Latin phrase memento mori is so important, as a remembered death. And once we accept that we've lost the game, right? That at the end of the day, we have lost because it's going to happen. I don't know if there's an afterlife. I like to think, I hope there is. But even if there's not, right? Even in the most nihilistic viewpoint, even if there's not, you still only have this limited amount of time, and you want to do the best you can with it. And I think that death is actually this amazing. I mean, Buddha said that death is the best teacher, so I'm just cribbing off of him. And when we know that it's coming, it allows us to take risks. It allows us to say, look, I can't do worse than death, right? I can't do worse than that. So I might as well go out and try to go roll around naked in the snow. Or I might as well go out and try to take a business decision that I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I'm just going to make the leap. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to die. And all we have is this one very precious time period to express ourselves as human, to claim our little tiny bit of ground, and then experience the hell out of it.
Woohoo! So let's talk about some of these experiencing the hell out of it. Since you went with cold baths, and I can remember my first one, Olympic Training Center, God only knows how many years ago, I had swollen God knows what from running, and they put me in an ice whirlpool. And they crank that thing up, and so it's colder than cold because it's continuously moving over you. Oh my God. Now you would take this, or have, like with Latvia saunas, and you would go from that freezing cold, let's throw you back to the hottest hot, then back to the freezing cold, then back to the hottest hot. What was going on, and then why did you end up buying a sauna for yourself?
One of the reasons why I went to Latvia is every circumpolar indigenous group on Earth has a heat tradition of some ways. In Finland, it's the sauna. Latvia, it's the sauna. There's the sweat lodges in North America. And I originally wanted to do a Lakota sweat lodge. And I talked to a bunch of Indian tribes, and they were like, you know what, Scott? We have a pretty fraught relationship with white guys coming in and co-opting our religion. So no. And I was like, you know what? That's fair. I can't really argue with that. And so I had sort of like put the sweat lodge on sort of the back burner, if you will. And I got this call from a guy in Latvia who runs a biohacking conference. His name is Maris Zunda. And he said, Scott, I want you to come and speak in Latvia to my biohacking conference, and I'm going to pay you with a sauna. And I was like, that sounds amazing. One, I'm the only person who's going to be like, yes, let's do that. So I flew out to Latvia with my wife, and honestly,
she's quite the sport, by the way.
She's the hero of the book. She's the hero. It's not me. It's the fact that she comes along for most of my crazy journeys and has different experiences than me. So this is that subjectivity thing that's so important, is you can see how I deal with something. You can see how she deals with something. And sometimes they're not the same, but I think we both get something out of every single thing that we tried. Yeah. And so we flew to Latvia, and the beauty of Latvia, and most people in America don't know much about Latvia. every person I met who I asked them what their religion was, they told me I am a pagan. And,
Very cool.
and I was like, whoa, like you just said you were a pagan, man. That's hard. That's metal, and these are, I mean, obviously there's Christianity has been the first Christmas tree ever was in Latvia and Riga. But
But
these
they're
people are
talking
like,
a connection to the earth, man.
to the earth, right? And so I went out, I did this great biohacking conference, and they have these saunas everywhere there. And Maris took me to a very special sauna. Saunas are called pirts there, and he introduced me to these. Basically, they're shamans. Okay, they're the Latvian version of a shaman, and they called themselves pirtnieks, which means person who owns a sauna. But there's probably a more specific shamanic word for it. But essentially, picture these people as garden gnomes, right? You meet them, and they've got these felt pointy hats on. They speak basically no English, like 3 or 4 words of English. And Laura and I show up at this beautiful like tea room sauna, right? So the building is half sauna, half tea room, and it starts out with them feeding us stuff from the earth, like bread that they have mixed with pine needles in some sort of like weird way, but familiar, right? Familiar. There's like tea made out of wormwood. There's like all of these like sort of contrasting sensations in the food that we're eating, and then they start off with a woodland ritual. And this is bizarre, and I just can't. I have to laugh.
This is
when I
exciting.
Think about it. So when it starts off, and Laura and I are, and actually one other guy is here at the time too. Maris has shown up, and we stand in a circle, and they say, "Close your eyes." And remember, this is a very small tea room, and there's a very hot sauna right next door, and the sauna is probably running at like 280. It's really hot right now, And so we sit there, and then they say, "Close your eyes," and we're going to perform the opening ritual, which I can't see it because my eyes are closed, but it's basically like the world comes alive around me as they shake leaves and branches, use rain sticks and like sort of dance around me like wood elves. It's super weird. And at one point they had this music box they're playing. It's like Fur-Elise on a music box. It's just this cacophony of weirdness. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Like, it's just strange, but it's also like familiar, like a fairy tale. And then, it lasts about 5 minutes, and I'm just like bizarrely distracted by this ritual. And then they say, "Okay, the ritual's over. Open your eyes." And I open my eyes, and then I just start sweating. Like, it's just like drenched in sweat all of a sudden, because I had not noticed that in the middle of their 5-minute ritual, they opened the door to the sauna. So the tea room got super, super hot. And I was just so distracted by the other sensations that I didn't realize what was actually going on physically. And this is sort of the stuff that they play with the whole ritual. So then, Maris heads out, and then my wife and I, we get naked and we go into the sauna, which is this beautiful place. And they start, it's probably running like 180, 200 in the sauna. We're lying down, and they start like hitting us with like bouquets of flowers. They start hitting us with like wormwood flowers, and there's some pine in there. They start rubbing our bodies with honey, and it's all this stuff that we ate before, right? It's a new context. And
wow.
And we're also like really heating up, and right to the point, and the first session is like an hour, and the whole ceremony is like 5 hours. But so as we get up to that, what I call a red line, that point where the world starts closing in and you're too damn hot to deal with it and you just want to run, they like take a little sprig of ice cold water and pour it on your feet and just bring you right below that red line. And so they're just sort of keeping you in this place of stress, but also comfort and weirdness. The weirdness is super important. And when they start, and you're like distracted by being whapped with wormwood, that you're not realizing that your body's like trying to figure out what to do with the environment. And then it gets weird. At some point when he's hitting me with wormwood, right? And wormwood's like it was like a yellow flower. I think that was wormwood anyway. And he hits me with it. I start experiencing synesthesia, which is the mixing of senses. So he hits me, and I taste the wormwood tea that I had before, and I start seeing the sound of the thing hitting me, and like my senses are all really confused. And by doing this, what's happening is that we're distracting ourselves from the actual environment, and I'm recoding my relationship with heat in ways that I couldn't do it so naturally because they have me in this sort of weird space. And then we go jump into the cold water, and then we go back into the sauna for another repeat of this. And the whole ritual is crazy, and you should just read about it. But at the end of it, I feel so clean. It's like when was the last time you heard something with your eyes? That's how clean I was. And I felt amazing. And when I came back, Laura and I more or less immediately bought a sauna, because the ability to use heat and endure heat is the converse of cold, right? In cold, what's happening is you're triggering your sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight responses. That's the natural response. And then you're controlling those. So you're moving to a parasympathetic state in the sympathetic environment. In the heat, it's the opposite. When you're very, very hot, you want to go parasympathetic. You want to go rest and digest. And then as you stay in longer, you're trying to control your sensations in this environment. And it proves really wonderful for things like depression. Like if you have this was a super cool thing that I found out by talking to a guy named Chuck Raison, who's a professor of I forget what he is, a professor of smart things over at University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has studied people with depression. He's found that the standard clinical presentation of someone with depression is they have a very slight fever. Like they run higher body temperatures, so their body is sort of always in that sort of like more increased state. And so he reasoned, and what he's shown is that if you put somebody in a sauna, so you actually they're sort of already at a heightened state, but then you put them way heightened in the sauna, when they reset, their body temperature comes back down to normal range, and then their depression alleviates. Crazy.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking with our boot campers last night. We have these week-long boot camps. And I was talking about depression. And to me, depression is going into a desire to go into the cave and heal and wait for the danger to pass. And if you think about what a fever does, it's a desire then to go into the cave and heal until the fever has passed. So it's fascinating that this fever takes place, and then you're breaking the fever. You're freaking the body out until it lets go of the fever. New reset point.
Mm-hmm. And the way you alleviate it is not by decreasing the body temperature directly by putting them in an ice bath. The way you alleviate it is you stoke the fever, right? You burn out the fever, and then you let their body come to the reset.
Well, that's a lot about what you're talking about in this book, and I'm going to recommend everybody get the Wedge, is you're talking about paradoxes. Let's get comfortable by getting uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yes. Every single thing is playing with the opposite.
Right. Think about think about this. I grew up on the East Coast in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I spent a lot of time sailing as a kid, and one of the things that every sailor knows, right? If you're on the high seas, and
Charles River, I used to sail all the time on the Charles.
Nice.
When I was growing up as a kid.
So when you're in like high seas, or you're in a wave, right? Your inclination is that wave is coming, as you want to run away from it, right? You want to turn the boat away and get the hell away from it. But every sailor knows, who's worth their salt, is that is
bad
not what
news.
You do. You turn into the wave and you go through and over it. And we find that if you're able to accept the challenge, and it's scary to go into the wave, right? But it's also your best damn shot to live. So that's what we have to do. And this whole book is like turning into the wave, and it's finding ways that sensations code the way we feel about the environment, right? Sensations are telling us about the environment, and a sensation that's telling you, watch out, is not necessarily the command for you to run, because the reason we have consciousness is to decide what those sensations mean, or else we wouldn't have consciousness, right? There'd be no point for consciousness if we couldn't contradict what our sensations are telling us.
So a part of this is actually, it's a shift of awareness, it's a shift of mindset, but it's also a shift in confidence. Objects in mirror are not as they appear to be. We get to learn by rediscovering our sensations. I'll go barefoot on us, by feeling the earth again, by feeling a giant metal kettlebell being thrown at us with 25 pounds that'll just shatter your bones if you don't catch it right.
Right.
We are getting to reframe what these things mean to us. And when we do that, we go, wow, it's not nearly what I thought it was. And all of a
Right.
sudden we're stronger. It's not nearly what I thought it was. And stronger. It's not what I thought it was. And stronger still.
Yeah, and it's not about getting super buff and super fit, although that can come from this.
I'm
It's
talking
about
the
that
internal
confidence
strength.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the wedge is. That's what we're trying to work on, and that's what we can. Honestly, it's our birthright. It's our birthright to go out there and face these challenges and become better. And also, the thing with kettlebells, which is so great, and the kettlebells basically you throw a kettlebell back and forth between two people, and it's and the danger. I'm going to break my foot is the whole freaking point, is that not so that you actually hurt yourself, but so that you don't hurt yourself and then you don't hurt the other person. And this drives you to focus on that object between the two of you, so laser-like focused that what happens, instead of a dangerous environment, you're actually dancing with each other, and your movements coordinate almost automatically, where there's no thought that goes in there. It's actually, I talk about the wedge as creating space between stimulus and response. In this case, with flow states, you're actually removing the wedge entirely, and you're just being in the moment. And there's no choice. It's just the environment and you're just responding automatically. And it's a beautiful thing because it builds trust between people. It's not just to look awesome on Instagram. It's to create empathy with another person. And it's actually not what it looks like at all. It's only about the internal state that I care about.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going from here. You're going out for a workout. I'm going to go for my skate. My skate is in a flow experience where if I don't focus, I'm on 8 wheels at 20 or so miles an hour. If I don't focus, it's not going to be a good outcome. Right. And so I have no choice but to, look at that. Nope. Mm-hmm. Drop in deeper, just be. And all of a sudden you've done this whole skate and you go, wow, what happened? I feel so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You dropped into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a familiar thing. It's such a human thing. And it's something that we all have the ability to do. And we're all using it all the time. It's just that now I'm hoping that people can read this book and find ways to get consciously deeper into it.
Tell me about, before we begin to wrap things out, tell me about Luzma, how she appeared to you, and what was this experience that I'm guessing still has stick with you to this day?
Absolutely. So Luzma is a shaman in Peru. Actually, I think she's in Michigan right now, but she's in Peru usually. And she is, so I wanted to do ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the psychedelic brew in the shamanic traditions of the Amazon, and it's used in various different ways. But I wanted to go down there and have this experience. And people have been talking about ayahuasca all over the place. You've probably heard of it, right? But I wanted to find the right person. Like, I knew that having the right experience was very important. And I talked to lots of different people and couldn't find anyone that to me said that this is the person I have to go to. So how I met her, right? I talked around to everybody and I said, and I actually, someone told me about Luzma, an anthropologist in Peru told me, oh, you should meet this Luzma lady. And I sent her an email, and I got an auto response being like, I'm in the jungle. I cannot talk. And I will not talk, basically. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I won't talk to her. And I actually over this was like a 6-month period where I'm just trying to find the right person. I wasn't in a rush to get down there. I'm never in a rush to do a psychedelic journey. And I actually was sort of on the point of like maybe giving up on this. And eventually in like December, I guess, I was giving a talk up in Aspen about What Doesn't Kill Us, which is my earlier book. And I was asleep in the hotel room, just about to wake up, and I had this dream about this beautiful dark-haired lady who says, here, eat these potatoes, like eat this boring diet, and then come have ayahuasca with me, essentially. So I woke up from this dream, and I'm like, oh, that was a really vivid dream about ayahuasca. And then I checked my phone, and I'm still in bed. I usually don't sleep next to my phone, but because I was in traveling, I did have it next to me. And I looked at it, and there was a message from Luzma saying, Scott, I just got your email. You must come to Peru and take ayahuasca with my teacher, Tony, and me. And I was like, well, if that's not, like, if I was looking for a sign from the shaman I should go with, I think this is like a giant neon billboard, right? So I did go down to Peru, and I met with her. This was 4 or 5 months after that. Luzma is an amazing person. I love Luzma to death. She is just such an inviting and wonderful person. But we were actually studying with her teacher, who is a guy. And And oh God, this whole experience is very long, so I'll give you the sort of shortened version of it. My point at this point is I had been doing all of these wedges, right, which is putting myself in stressful situations with different sensations and controlling myself. And it's usually one wedge at a time. But the shamanic ceremony is like everything all at once. It's like pitch black. There's music, there's scents, there's a psychedelic potion, and you're in a totally foreign environment. Like
and
it's
good
it's
luck
all
controlling yourself.
Right. Exactly. So it's sort of like everything at once. And so I figured I wanted the biggest experience. Like this is me wanting to go back to the mountain. I want to go be one with everything again. I want the universe. I don't know what I want. It's just huge, very big ambitions. And so the first night, I basically get off the plane and go right into the ceremony. Like Tony is like, tonight you will do it. And I'm like, wait, what? I just got off the plane. He's like, nope, 11 p.m. And so I'm in the jungle, right? If Iquitos, which is this pretty remote area, and then we're 45 minutes or an hour outside that in the jungle. Big leafy rainforest. Imagine jaguars everywhere. I mean, way out there. Get into this hut, and Tony is there, and he starts the ritual, and he sings these fairy tales almost like that familiarity I was talking about with the shamans in Latvia. There's sort of a familiar quality to what they were doing, and there's also this familiar quality to the songs that Tony's singing, even though they're in Quechua or some other language. And everyone takes this, and ayahuasca. You've had it. It's like the worst tasting stuff on earth. It's like it was like coffee grounds and rotten fruit with the consistency of motor oil. This is not a party drug.
I like to say that if you're thinking of ayahuasca as recreational, please go outside right away and drive a car over your foot. You're going to have more fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's not fun. But I take this down, and again, I'm wanting to go to the universe, right? And instead, I'm hearing you say this, Scott, and I'm going, oh man, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. Right. So the way shamans talk about ayahuasca is that you're talking to the spirit of the plant, right? There's this external thing that's talking to you. I don't know if that's true. It could also be your psychology, your own issues, and it's just a chemical thing. I'm sort of agnostic as to what is happening, but certainly the experience of it is something external to you, giving you a lens on yourself. And that's what ayahuasca feels like for me. And so essentially what ayahuasca does is after it gives it's like, when you write a book critique, I don't know if you've done this, but like you read someone's article, you start with like a compliment and then you just lay into them afterwards. That's what ayahuasca did to me. Ayahuasca is like, Scott, you're really cool in these like 8 ways, but here's how lame you are too. And it shows me a lens onto the things that, honestly, this is always embarrassing for me to talk about because my image is, of course, this awesome guy who does awesome things to some degree, right? But the truth is I'm just as lame as everyone else. And one of the things as a writer, in particular, is like I have these times where things are really exciting, but then a lot of like downtime. And it's like these cycles of like really intense and really not intense. And for me, what is I can get so caught up in was video games. Like I could play a video game for hours and hours and hours. Like several books worth of material have gone into video games in my life. And ayahuasca is like, Scott, this is a problem. Let me tell you all about it. And she just like talks to me about how like lame my video game addiction is. And then she tells me also why it's so addicting. It's like, these things give you a sense of accomplishment, right? You build the village, you defeat the warlock or whatever, and then you feel better about yourself because there's a little dopamine hit. And so if you want to stop this, if you want to be more productive, then you need to find something else to fill the space. So it's a lot like a psychologist just talking to me, but it's this ayahuasca god talking to me. And so it's like an 8-hour experience. At the end of it, I'm exhausted. And I'm also like, well, that was lame. I sort of wanted to go to the universe, but all I got was lectured. Yeah. And so then, you write, and the writing about what your visions are is just as important as the actual experience. And so I process for a day, but I'm also like, look, in 3 days is the next ceremony, and I want this to be big. So I'm going to brew the ayahuasca myself. this next time. And I'm like, I want the universe. I don't want to be lame, just told how lame I am. I want, the big thing. And so I go back and I brew it. I brew it with Luzma. And we're like, we're actually cutting down the vines and finding the leaves that go into the cauldron and filling up cauldron with all the stuff that makes ayahuasca. And it's like a 18-hour process over this cauldron. And we're like smoking tobacco and blowing our intentions into this. I'm like, big thing. And then Tony, at the end of this whole, is like, Scott, you made a bomb. You made something big. This is going to be big. And I'm like, yes, it's going to be big. Yeah, we're going to go into it. And so on the second time we do this, we're in the same hut, the same like familiar shamanic chanting going on. And also the thing about ayahuasca, which sucks, is that you throw up. I don't think I mentioned this earlier. You vomit and it sucks. It's like you thought it tasted bad going down. It's worse coming up. So, I drink this down knowing what's going to happen, but I'm still like, okay, it's worth it because I'm going to go big this time. He said it was a bomb. And I sit back down and I'm ready and nothing. Like just the shaman and me and the other people in the room. And I'm like, this is lame. I'm like all I did was drink this boring this disgusting potion, and now I'm bored. And we're like 2 hours into the experience, and nothing is happening. No visions, no God, no nothing. And I'm like, oh no. And then that roiling starts happening in my stomach. It's like blah blah, and it's this horror show. And I'm like, oh no, now I have to go through with this. So I grab the dirty, horrible bucket that 18 people have vomited in before me, and I over it, and I start vomiting and horking, and then I vomit out video games. Video games sploosh into the bottom of that bucket, and I'm like, oh my God. And like whatever the physical thing about video games in me, that manifestation has congealed and has been expelled from my body. And fast forward, now this was about 2.5 years ago. I didn't play video games at all until COVID. And then I was like, okay, well, my book's about to come out. That. Yeah, let's try them out. And they're fine. They're cool. Whatever. I don't have that sort of like draw to make it take over my life. It's like I'm sure I could form it again, right? Like, sure I could go recreate it in myself, but that's not the point. It's the fact that I expelled it and then I was free of that chain. And I can totally see how this is useful for addictions and all sorts and sizes. And then, the third time I do ayahuasca, I go meet the universe, and it's great.
Well, in the third time, to me personally, because I had this, I guess it was my second time, was kind of maybe your third time. It's such a unique experience. That's even terrible to say. But it really did something powerful. I learned about, no, it was my third time. It was called the sanctity of your relationship. And I met with like a fairy godmother. She had wings, and she was telling me to, I wish I could remember the exact words. I wrote it down as well. It was like a sacred code or a sacred bond. Respect the sacred bond. And it wasn't about cheating or anything. Respect the sacred bond. And I learned just how the power of a relationship in my third ceremony. And it sounds like you got that throughout the generations of your life.
Right. Yeah. So in the final ceremony, I am, it starts off and again, at the beginning of this ceremony, again, nothing happened. It was like boring. And I was like, oh no, a third one that's boring. And then I started doing the Wim Hof breathing. I did the DMT breathing, and I activated the ceremony. Once I did that, boom, I was just shot out into it. And it was like seeing my life. At first, I went to my childhood, and I saw my child self, my 7-year-old self, in its childhood bedroom, and I remembered what it felt like to be in that space, like what my emotions were in that space, and what my relationships with all my family members were. And it was like traveling really like back in time to being there. And you're only there for like a minute or two, and then you flash to the next thing, and then on my sister, and then on my mother, and then on my grandmother, then on my great grandmother, and I sort of like shoot up the family line where I am those different people feeling what they're feeling in that moment. I get this sort of sip of their life, it puts things in perspectives for me, and it's. Yeah, I don't know exactly how to explain it very coherently, because honestly, these journeys are so they're so much beyond words, right? It's so hard to try. Like, how do you describe a sensation anyway? How do you describe what it feels like to sneeze? It's actually very difficult to do that. You can say I sneezed, but now multiply that by a psychedelic experience, and I can't do it.
What's the higher level perspective you got on your life? Because this was kind of a pinnacle of all of these hacks, of all of these experiences, and then you're with Luzma and you go through these things. How has it changed your perspective on the world, or on you, the world of Scott?
I think ayahuasca for me is a lot about temporality, right? And continuance. It's the idea that, and they call it the vine of death for a reason. Oftentimes on psychedelics, you'll have visions of your own death. And I think it gives you perspective on what life is worth, and also how wonderful these connections are to the people who create you. Right? Even ways that you don't even think that they create you. We are really part of everyone else that we've ever touched, and everyone else is part of everyone they touch. And so we're all sort of just one miasma of consciousness. And there's this really sort of wholesome, sort of warm feeling about it, because on one level, hey, I don't want to die, right? And you probably don't want to die. Like, I love this whole thing that I'm part of, and I'm enjoying it.
This video game.
Yeah, this video is great. But there's also this sense that, look, it's all part of one big thing, and it's okay. Like, dying is okay. Don't do it, but it's okay because it's what everyone else has done, right? And you still have this impact. Like, if you think about like a life is like throwing a rock into a pond, there's these ripples that go out and inform the rest of the pond forever. And you don't actually die. Your experience of it, like this sort of egotistical experience, may disappear, but you are part of the world, and the world created you, and you have created the world, and you will go back into that pond at some point. And I'm still terrified of death to some degree, but I'm also okay with it. There's that tension.
What is your overarching view now of what's going on with COVID, with everything? And it's interesting that you use the term one. I love this. I will quote you in this for the rest of my life. One miasma of consciousness.
I think COVID is ultimately and dispassionately, because I don't want to minimize the experience of people in the front lines. I think that COVID has the potential to be a very beneficial thing for society. I think in moments of stress, we have the ability to change in a positive manner. And I don't know if our political system is going to be fixed. I hope it is. But I think personally, I'm not as connected to the constant drib and drab of the horror of the internet. Like, I'm disconnected from the news right now. And I think it's really like, look at the number of Instagram influencers on the internet who has rapidly declined, right? Because it's not all about going to foreign awesome locales and looking awesome. Like, we're turning inwards. And I think this is really, really positive for society. And I hope that we were able, and I believe that at the end of this, we will have changed for the better because we have gone through stress together, because everyone in the world is doing this together. We're all in this experience. We're all in essentially a flow state, whether we like it or not. And I think that this is an opportunity for some level of collective consciousness. And I really hope that we carry these lessons forward. I hope that we don't just get sucked back in to our constant internet ridiculousness again.
So I've been looking at this as what I call a global NDE, near-death experience, or global detox. But I think you just actually, without realizing it, you hit the nail on the head. This is a very long, slow, drawn-out ayahuasca ceremony where we are going through the grinder and having every vision after vision come up of what's important, of what's not, of who we want to be, of who we were. And we're barfing out the video games now.
I certainly hope so. And, if we don't learn it this time, we'll learn it next time, right? I mean, it's not, the 1918 flu was much worse, and we could get that again too. And I think that it is very important. For many of us, we're thinking about death in a way that was more real than it was before. And I have great sympathy for everyone who is dying on this disease and the horror that their families and they are going through. But it is important to recognize the finality, because that gives us stakes to care about.
I like it. I've often said that we would live a different life if we lived like a loaf of bread, meaning if we had an expiration date printed on our forehead, just think of how we would live.
Yeah, much more fulfilled in those moments.
2 last questions. First off, actually 3. Very curious. First, what's on your arm? What's the meaning behind it?
Oh, man. It says Hanuz Dili Dur Ast, which means Delhi is far away. And when I was so I mentioned this at the top of the show. I think I mentioned this at the top of the show. Well, I was leading abroad programs in North India, and a student of mine killed herself on a meditation retreat. And I had to bring her body to Delhi. And it's a proverb in India which means essentially you are not in the center of civilization, right? That was actually sort of a Quit India movement slogan, meaning that if the center of civilization is Delhi, you ain't nowhere near it. So it's both a memory of my student who died, and it's a memory of like constant. It's always going to be a struggle to get to perfection, and you're not going to get there, but you might as well try.
Excellent. And maybe everybody else knows what's on your T-shirt, but can you tell us about the fox?
Oh no, it's not a fox. It's a foxtopus.
It is a foxtopus.
It's a foxtopus. So my company is called Foxtopus Inc. And so I self-published my book through Foxtopus Inc. But also we have podcasts and some movies and stuff like that too. But we have a podcast called Wild Thing about my wife's search for Bigfoot, because she is related to the world's preeminent expert on Bigfoot, who was a tenured professor of anthropology at Washington State University. And he put his career on the line to search for the big guy. And she was like, and my wife, who was an NPR editor for 10 years, was like, oh my God, I have to go follow in his footsteps and find Bigfoot to understand it. So this whole like Foxtopus is like the stuff that we do. And yeah. It's a fox and octopus mating, and that's what comes to it.
How did you come up with that? Or how did she come up with that?
Oh, because I'm an octopus and she's a fox, so that's what happens.
And she really, by living with you, you guys are searching for Bigfoot continuously.
Well,
in a sense.
We are certainly searching the limits of. We're certainly curious about everything, and we don't discount everything. And the hope, this isn't one of those like Finding Bigfoot shows. It's actually a way to talk about evolution. It's a way to talk about how, about the wilderness areas and the mystique of the unknown. And honestly, it's more about the search than the finding. Because honestly, I don't want to find Bigfoot. I hope Bigfoot, whether or not he exists, I hope he never gets found, because it's way more fun to search for him than it is to see a monkey in a cage.
Woohoo! So usually this is where I ask Scott any last words of wisdom, but instead of doing that, I'm going to ask, what would Laura say right now, and how has she changed through this whole journey?
I am just surprised that she's still with me with all the stuff I put her through. No, she will sometimes come on to these shows. She has found out she finds these things beneficial. She thinks that the week I made her eat just potatoes was horrible.
You'll have to check that out in the book.
Yeah. And I think she is less drawn to the psychedelics than I am. But she certainly is. We do the breathing every day. So, we sauna probably 3 times a week together. We throw some kettlebells. And overall, it's made our relationship stronger, surprisingly.
Woohoo! I guess I got to ask, any last words of wisdom? You may have just covered it right there, Scott.
There's no wisdom left. I'm an empty vessel.
I love it. This has been awesome, Scott. This has been awesome, awesome, awesome. Everybody go on out and get the Wedge. Where can people go to find your beautiful book and to find out more, Scott?
My website is scottcarney.com. You can get a sample chapter. You can, and there's links to all of the various ways to buy the book. Obviously, Amazon and Audible are there. But if you want to support your local bookshops, there's a link on my website to like something called bookshop.org that then you can go give it to your corner place, some money to your corner place. For me, it's all good. However you get the book, if you can find it in a library, great. Read the book. I hope it speaks to you. That's really the hope here.
For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, dive into the unknown and begin rediscovering who you truly are by experiencing the world, the challenges, the paradoxes today, and shine bright. Woohoo!
All right.
This went long because it was just too cool, Scott. This was too cool.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go for a bike ride. See you later.
If you're watching this, then you are a light worker. You're a light warrior, and I want to help. We offer everything from boot camps, mini masterclasses, full-on masterminds, and private one-on-one coaching with me. To find out more about our upcoming courses, simply visit InspireNationUniversity.com or click on the links below. And to find out more about coaching, simply visit InspireNationUniversity.com/coaching. We also have weekly YouTube live events with me where you can ask me your questions live and YouTube premieres featuring me and our guests. Simply subscribe below and click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows. I just had the most beautiful out-of-this-world interview with Scott Carney on The Wedge. To check out more inspiring interviews, click here, subscribe below, be sure to click on that bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, and lives. Join all of our boot camps below where we learn and grow together. And above and beyond all else, shine bright.